Hello, hello, hello! Greetings, salutations, konnichiwa, and every other form of green across this vast, marvelous multiverse. I am Matsu Quinox. This is Horus. Hold on, my dear scholars. And welcome back once again, my dear scholars, to the study. Sorry about that. We had a herd of bison run through here. I didn't want to interrupt our little flow. No, I'm serious. It was a herd of bison. I mean the Sunshine Prairie room moved so that we've got access to this room, and they stampeded right through here. I swear I'm gonna have to clean up the carpet again. Um, Virgil, would you mind if Ovid and you took care of that while I'm streaming? Well, thank you. Yes, yes, thank you. Sorry about that. So then, my dear scholars, how are all you marvelous, wonderful scholars doing this fine afternoon, evening, or morning, wherever you are, whenever you are, elsewhere here in the multiverse or omniverse? Or Lady Yumi, poor Virgil. Oh, true. Oh, I forgot to say hello. Hello there, Luki. Lurking Yoshi, welcome. Congratulations on getting first. Hello there, Cool Skeleton, welcome. Hello there, Julian20, welcome. Hello there, Private Maverick, welcome. Hello there, Lady Yumi, welcome. Hello, hello, hello. Julian20, okie dokie, fine and dandy. Well, good to hear that. Good to hear that. Oh, it's been a very odd day today. We didn't get any work done today, but we still had lots of things to do. And it just feels, very odd, especially energy wise. Very, very odd. So, yes, I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're all doing fine. Lady Yumi, let's start this thing off right. Oh, thank you for the hydrate, Lady Yumi. I needed that because we are going to be doing a lot of reading today. Well, as much reading as I can get through. Since Lady Yumi brought it up, tonight we are going to continue our reading of The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood. Oh, ho, ho, it's been a very wordy book so far. I will not lie. It is a very wordy book, and we barely started last time. Last time we got an introduction to how Robin Hood became an outlaw, how he met Little John, and how Robin Hood apparently Stockholm syndromed a tinker into joining his merry band. I'm not joking. It was a very strange situation. Um, but yes, tonight hopefully we'll get through some more of the book. Julian20, nice guy. Yeah, really. He, he's all for robbing the rich, giving to the poor, and generally harassing people. I guess that's his thing. So anyway, my dear scholars, if is there anything else you wish to talk about? Any other redeems you want to do before I start? Anything you want to get out of the way? Feel free to do it. Excuse me, sorry. Oh, but anyway, my dear scholars, shall we begin our reading of Robin Hood? Sophia Ignacy, I want a Matsu hug. Oh, I would give you one. Oh, welcome, Sophia. Glad to have you here. Sounds like you're feeling a little bit down. Well, just, be here. And I would give you a hug, except currently my arms apparently don't work. They're kind of pinned under here. I mean, we have. How are we stuck here anyway? How am I stuck here? Ugh. Sophia Ignacy, I'm tired. Well then, since we've been given the go-ahead to read, then I shall say, sit back, relax, have a hot or cold beverage of your liking, dim the lights if possible, and we will read more of Howard Pyle's The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood. Now, this doesn't have proper chapter titles, it's just numerals. You see? 2. The Shooting Match at Nottingham Town. Then the sheriff was very wroth because of this failure to take Jolly Robin, for it came to his ears, as ill news always does, that the people laughed at him, and made a jest of his thinking to serve a warrant upon such a one as the bold outlaw. And a man hates nothing so much as being made a jest of. So he said, "Our gracious lord and sovereign king himself shall know of this, and how his laws are perverted and despised by this band of rebel outlaws. As for yon traitor Tinker, him will I hang, if I catch." One second, my dear scholar, something came up. I'm sorry, it's those. It's the bison again. They just plowed through again. It's getting really. It's getting a little irritating. Irritable. Lady Yumi, it's the bison. Who wants to place bets? Yes, it was the bisons. It was the bisons. Now, where was I? Then he bade all his servants and retainers to make ready to go to London town to see and speak with the king. At this there was bustling at the sheriff's castle, and men ran hither and thither upon this business and upon that, while the forge fires of Nottingham glowed red far into the night, like twinkling stars. For all the smiths of the town were busy making or mending armor for the sheriff's troop of escort. For 2 days this labor lasted. Then on the third, all was ready for the journey. So forth they started in the bright sunlight, from Nottingham town to Fosse Way, and thence to Watling Street. And so they journeyed for 2 days, until they saw at last the spires and towers of great London town, and many folks stopped as they journeyed along and gazed at the show they made riding along the highways with their flashing armor and gay plumes and trappings. Excuse me. In London, King Henry and his fair Queen Eleanor held their court, gay with ladies in silks and satins and velvets and cloth of gold, and also brave knights and gallant courtiers. Thither came the sheriff and was shown into the king's presence. For those who weren't here last time, um, as I mentioned in this book, unlike most adaptations of the Robin Hood legend, which place Robin Hood around the time of King Richard and have Prince John as his foe, this book places Robin Hood during the time of King Henry II. So it's a completely different king for these stories. A boon, quoth he as he knelt upon the ground. Now what wouldst thou have? Said the king. Let us hear what may be thy desires. O good my lord and sovereign, spake the sheriff, in Sherwood Forest, in our own good shire of Nottingham, liveth a bold outlaw whose name is Robin Hood. In good sooth, said the king, his doings have reached even our own royal ears. He is a saucy, rebellious varlet, yet I am fain to own, a right merry soul withal. But hearken, O my most gracious sovereign, said the sheriff. I sent a warrant to him with thine old royal seal attached, by a right lusty knave, but he beat the messenger and stole the warrant, and he killeth thy deer and robbeth thine own liege subjects even upon the great highways. Why, how now? Quoth the king wrathfully. What wouldst thou have me do? Comest thou not to me with a great array of men-at-arms and retainers, and yet art not able to take a single band of lusty knaves without armour on breast, in thine own county? What wouldst thou have me do? Art thou not my sheriff? Are not my laws in force in Nottinghamshire? Canst thou not take thine own course against those that break the laws, or do an injury to thee or thine? Go, get thee gone, and think well. Devise some plan of thine own, but trouble me no further. But look well to it, Master Sheriff, for I will have my laws obeyed by all men within my kingdom, and if thou art not able to enforce them, thou art no sheriff for me. So look well to thyself, I say, or ill may befall thee as well as all the thieving knaves in Nottinghamshire. When the flood cometh, it sweepeth away grain as well as the chaff. Sorry, needed another hydrate. Then the sheriff turned away with a sore and troubled heart, and sadly he rued his fine show of retainers, for he saw that the king was angry because he had so many men about him and yet could not enforce the laws. So, as they all rode slowly back to Nottingham, the sheriff was thoughtful and full of care. Not a word did he speak to anyone, and no one of his men spoke to him, but all the time he was busy devising some plan to take Robin Hood. "Aha!" cried he suddenly, smiting his hand upon his thigh. "I have it now. Ride on, my merry men all, and let us get back to Nottingham town as speedily as we may. And mark well my words. Before a fortnight is past, that evil knave, Robin Hood, will be safely clapped into Nottingham gaol. Old word for a jail. It's very hard to pronounce. But what was the sheriff's plan? As a miser takes each one of a bag of silver angels, feeling each coin to find whether it be clipped or not, so the sheriff, as all rode slowly and sadly back towards Nottingham, took up thought after thought in turn, feeling around the edges of each, but finding in every one some flaw. At last he thought of the daring soul of Jolly Robin, and how, as he, the sheriff, knew, he often came within the walls of Nottingham. Now, thought the sheriff, could I but persuade Robin nigh to Nottingham town so that I could find him, I warrant I would lay hands upon him so stoutly that he would never get away again. Then of a sudden it came to him like a flash that were he to proclaim a great shooting match and offer some grand prize, Robin Hood might be over persuaded by his spirit to come to the butts, and it was this thought which caused him to cry "Aha!" and smite his palm upon his thigh. I'm not sure if hearing the word butts and thigh in the same sentence quite is what I expected from this book. So as soon as he had returned safely to Nottingham, he sent messengers north and south and east and west to proclaim through town, hamlet, and countryside this grand shooting match, and everyone was bidden that could draw a long bow, and the prize was to be an arrow of pure beaten gold. When Robin Hood first heard the news of this he was in Lincoln town, and hastening back to Sherwood Forest he soon called all his merry men about him, and spoke to them thus: "Now hearken, my merry men all, to the news that I have brought from Lincoln town today. Our friend, the Sheriff of Nottingham, hath proclaimed a shooting match, and hath sent messengers to tell of it through all the countryside, and the prize is to be a bright golden arrow. Now, I fain would have one of us win it, both because of the fairness of the prize, and because our sweet friend the sheriff hath offered it. So we will take our bows and shafts and go there to shoot, for I know right well that merriment will be a-going. What say ye, lads?" Then young David of Doncaster spoke up and said, "Now listen, I pray thee, good master, unto what I say. I have come straight from our friend Edmund o' the Blue Boar, and there I heard the full news of this same match. But, master, I know from him, and he got it from the sheriff's man Ralph o' the Scar, that this same knavish sheriff hath but laid a trap for thee in this shooting match, and wishes nothing so much as to see thee there. So go not, good master, for I know right well he doth seek to beguile thee, but stay within the greenwood lest we all meet dole and woe." "Now," quoth Robin, "thou art a wise lad, and keepest thine ears open, and thy mouth shut, as becometh a wise and crafty woodsman. But shall we let it be said that the Sheriff of Nottingham did cow bold Robin Hood, and 70 fair archers as are in all merry England? Nay, good David, what thou tellest me maketh me to desire the prize even more than I else should do. But what saith our good gossip Swathold? Is it not a hasty man burneth his mouth, and the fool that keepeth his eyes shut falleth into the pit? Thus he says truly, therefore we must meet guile with guile. Now, some of you clothe yourselves as curtail friars, and some as rustic peasants, and some as tinkers, or as beggars. But see that each man taketh a good bow or broadsword in case need should arise. As for myself, I will shoot for this same golden arrow, and should I win it, we will hang it in the branches of our good greenwood tree for the joy of all the band. How like you the plan, my merry men all?" Then, "Good, good!" cried all the band right heartily. Just checking a few things. Okay. A fair sight was Nottingham town on the day of the shooting match. All along upon the green meadow beneath the town wall stretched a row of benches, one above the other, which were for knight and lady, squire and dame, and rich burghers and their wives, but none but those of rank and quality were to sit there. Excuse me. At the end of the range near the target was a raised seat, bedecked with ribbons and scarves and garlands of flowers, for the Sheriff of Nottingham and his dame. The range was 20 paces broad. At one end stood the target, at the other a tent of striped canvas, from the pole of which fluttered many-colored flags and streamers. In this booth were casks of ale, free to be broached by any of the archers who might wish to quench their thirst. I would think that'd be not a very smart move. I mean, you're shooting an arrow. Do you really want to drink ale during it? Although, if I recall, alcohol, ale did not have the same amount of alcohol back then that it does now. So, you might be able to drink and shoot an arrow at the same time. Especially if you're only having one drink, I suppose. Across the range from where the seats for the better folk were raised was a railing to keep the poorer people from crowding in front of the target. Already, while it was early, the benches were beginning to fill with people of quality, who kept constantly arriving in little carts or upon palfreys that curvetted gaily to the merry tinkle of silver bells at bridle reins. With these came also the poorer folk, who sat or lay upon the green grass near the railing that kept them from off the range. Jerks. At the great tent the archers were gathering by twos and threes, some talking loudly of the fair shots each man had made in his day, some looking well to their bows, drawing a string betwixt the fingers to see that there was no fray upon it, or inspecting arrows, shutting one eye and peering down a shaft to see that it was not warped, but straight and true, for neither bow nor shaft should fail at such a time and for such a prize, and never were such a company of yeomen as were gathered at Nottingham town that day. For the very best archers of merry England had come to this shooting match. There was Gillo the Redcap, the sheriff's own head archer, and Deccan Cruikshank of Lincoln town, and Adam O'Dell, a man of Tamworth, of 60 years and more, yet hale and lusty still, who in his time had shot in the famous match at Woodstock, and had there beaten that renowned archer Clym o' the Clough. And many more famous men of the longbow were there, whose names have been handed down to us in goodly ballads of the olden time. But now all the benches were filled with guests, lord and lady, burgher and dame, when at last the sheriff himself came with his lady, he riding with stately mien upon his milk-white horse, and she upon her brown filly. Upon his head he wore a purple velvet cap, and purple velvet was his robe, all trimmed about with rich ermine. His jerkin and hose were of sea-green silk, and his shoes of black velvet, the pointed toes fastened to his garters with golden chains. A golden chain hung about his neck, and at his collar was a great carbuncle set in red gold. His lady was dressed in blue velvet, all trimmed with swan down. So they made a gallant sight as they rode along side by side, and all the people shouted from where they crowded across the space from the gentlefolk. So the sheriff and his lady came to their place, where men-at-arms with hauberk and spear stood about, waiting for them. Then when the sheriff and his dame had sat down, he bade his herald wind upon his silver horn, who thereupon sounded 3 blasts that came echoing cheerily back from the grey walls of Nottingham. Then the archers stepped forth to their places, while all the folk shouted with a mighty voice, each man calling upon his favourite yeoman. Redcap, cried some. Cruikshank, cried others. Hey for William O'Leslie, shouted others yet again, while ladies waved silken scarves to urge each yeoman to do his best. Then the herald stood forth and loudly proclaimed the rules of the game as follows. Shoot each man from yon mark, which is 70 yards and 10 from the target. 1 arrow shooteth each man first, And from all the archers shall the 10 that shooteth the fairest shafts be chosen for to shoot again. 2 arrows shooteth each man of these 10. Then shall the 3 that shoot the fairest shafts be chosen for to shoot again. 3 arrows shooteth each man of those 3, and to him that shooteth the fairest shafts shall the prize be given. It kind of bothers me. It goes from 10 to 3 to 1. Feels like there should be a number in between, like a 5. It just kind of bothers me a little bit that they're doing that. Then the sheriff leaned forward, looking keenly among the press of archers to find whether Robin Hood was amongst them. But no one was there clad in Lincoln green, such as was worn by Robin and his band. Nevertheless, said the sheriff to himself, he may still be there, and I miss him among the crowd of other men. But let me see when but 10 men shoot, for I wot he will be among the 10, or I know him not. Oh, thank you for the follow, Sakura 2009. Welcome! I am Matsu, Quinox, interdimensional omniversal librarian. This is Horace. I do gaming streams on Tuesday, reading streams on Thursday, and right now we are reading The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood. And they are right in the middle of a shooting match. Welcome! Have a seat. Where am I? And now the archers shot, each man in turn, and the good folk never saw such archery as was done that day. 6 were within the clout, 4 within the black, and only 2 smote the outer ring, so that when the last arrow sped and struck the target, all the people shouted aloud, for it was noble shooting. And now but 10 men were left of all those that had shot before, and of these 10, 6 were famous throughout the land, and most of the folks gathered there knew them. These 6 men were Gilbert o' the Redcap, Adam o' the Dell, Dickon Crookshank, William o' Leslie, Herbert O'Cloud, and Swithane o' Hertford. 2 others were yeomen of merry Yorkshire. Another was a tall stranger in blue, who said he came from London town. And the last was a tattered stranger in scarlet, who wore a patch over one eye. Now, quoth the sheriff to a man-at-arms who stood near him, seest thou, Robin Hood, amongst those 10? Nay, that do I not, your worship, answered the man. 6 of them I know right well. Of those Yorkshire yeomen, one is too tall and the other too short for that bold knave. Robin's beard is as yellow as gold, while yon tattered beggar in scarlet hath a beard of brown, besides being blind of one eye. As for the stranger in blue, Robin's shoulders, I ween, are 3 inches broader than his. Then, quoth the sheriff, smiting his thigh angrily, again with the thigh. Yon knave is a coward as well as a rogue, dares not show his face amongst good men and true. Then, after they had rested a short time, those 10 stout men stepped forth to shoot again. Each man shot 2 arrows, and as they shot, not a word was spoken. But all the crowd watched with scarce a breath of sound. But when the last had shot his arrow, another great shout arose, while many cast their caps aloft for joy of such marvellous shooting. Now, by our gracious lady fair, quoth old Sir Amias o' the Dell, who bowed with 80 years and more, sat near the sheriff. Ne'er saw I such archery in all my life before, yet have I seen the best hands at the longbow for 80 years or more. And now but 3 men were left of all those that had shot before. One was Gil the Redcap, one the tattered stranger in scarlet, and one Adam O'Dell of Tamworth town. Then all the people called aloud, some crying, Ho, for Gilbert o' the Redcap, and some "Hey for stout Adam o' Tamworth!" But not a single man in the crowd called upon the stranger in scarlet. "Now truly thou will, now shoot thou well, Gilbert," cried the sheriff, "and if thine be the best shaft, 50 broad silver pennies will I give to thee beside the prize." "Truly I will do my best," quoth Gilbert right sturdily. "Yulian 20, time to go to hip hop class. Bye." "Oh, have fun, Yulian. Have a good time." "A man cannot do aught but his best, but that will I strive to do this day." So saying, he drew forth a fair smooth arrow with a broad feather, and fitted it deftly to the string. Then drawing his bow with care, he sped the shaft. Straight flew the arrow, and lit fairly in the clout, a finger breadth from the centre. "A Gilbert! A Gilbert!" shouted all the crowd, and "Now by my faith!" cried the sheriff, smiting his hands together, "that is a shrewd shot." Then the tattered stranger stepped forth, and all the people laughed as they saw a yellow patch that showed beneath his arm when he raised his elbow to shoot, and also to see him aim with but one eye. He drew the good yew bow quickly, and quickly loosened a shaft. So short was the time that no man could draw a breath betwixt the drawing and the shooting. Yet his arrow lodged near the centre, then the other by twice the length of a barley corn. "Now by all the saints in paradise!" cried the sheriff, "that is a lovely shaft in very truth." Then Adam o' the Dell shot, carefully and cautiously, and his arrow lodged close beside the stranger's. Then after a short space they all three shot again. Once more each arrow lodged within the clout, but this time Adam o' the Dell was farthest from the centre, and again the tattered stranger's shot was the best. Then, after another rest, they all shot for the third time. This time Gilbert took great heed to his aim, keenly measuring the distance and shooting with the shrewdest care. Straight flew the arrow, and all shouted till the very flags that waved in the breeze shook with the sound, and the rooks and daws flew clamoring about the roofs of the old grey tower, for the shaft had lodged close beside the spot that marked the very centre. Well done, Gilbert!" cried the sheriff right joyously. "Fain am I to believe the prize is thine, and right fairly won. Now, thou ragged knave, let me see thee shoot a better shaft than that." Naught spake the stranger, but took his place, while all was hushed, and no one spoke or even seemed to breathe. So great was the silence for wonder what he would do. Meanwhile, also quite still stood the stranger holding his bow in his hand, while one could count fives. Then he drew his trusty yew, holding it drawn but a moment, then loosed the string. Straight flew the arrow, and so true it smote a grey goose feather from off Gilbert's shaft, which fell fluttering through the sunlight air as the stranger's arrow lodged close beside his of the red cap, and in the very centre. No one spoke a word for a while, and no one shouted. But each man looked into his neighbor's face amazingly. "Nay," quoth old Adam o' the Dell presently, drawing a long breath and shaking his head as he spoke. 2 score years and more have I shot shaft, and maybe not all times bad, but I'll shoot no more this day, for no man can match with yon stranger, whosoever he may be." Then he thrust his shaft into his quiver, rattling and unstrung his bow without another word. Then the sheriff came down from his dais and drew near, in all his silks and velvets, to where the tattered stranger stood leaning upon his stout bow, whilst the good folk crowded around to see the man who shot so wondrously well. "Here, good fellow," quoth the sheriff, "take thou the prize, and well and fairly hast thou won it. I trow. What be thy name, and whence come thou?" "Men do call me Jock o' Trivedale, and thence am I come," said the stranger. "Then by Our Lady, Jock, thou art the fairest archer that e'er mine eyes beheld. And if thou wilt join my service, I will clothe thee with a better coat than that thou hast upon thy back. Thou shalt eat and drink of the best, and at every Christmas tide 80 marks shall be thy wage. I trow thou drawest better bow than that same coward knave, Robin Hood, that dared not show his face here this day. Say, good fellow, wilt thou join my service?" "Nay, that will I not," quoth the stranger roughly. "I will be mine own, and no man in all merry England shall be my master." "Then get thee gone, and a murrain seize thee," cried the sheriff, and his voice trembled with anger. "And by my faith and troth, I have a good part of a mind to have thee beaten for thine insolence." Then he turned upon his heel and strode away. It was a right motley company that gathered about the noble greenwood tree in Sherwood's depths that same day. A score and more of barefoot friars were there, and some that looked like tinkers, and some that seemed to be sturdy beggars and rustic hinds, and seated upon a mossy couch was one all clad in tattered scarlet, with a patch over one eye, and in his hand he held the golden arrow that was the prize of the great shooting match. Then amidst a noise of talking and laughter he took the patch from off his eye, and stripped away the scarlet rags from off his body, and showed himself all clothed in fair Lincoln green, and quoth he, "Easily come these things away, but walnut stain cometh not so speedily from yellow hair." Then all laughed louder than before, for it was Robin Hood himself that had won the prize from the sheriff's very hands. Then all sat down to the woodland feast, and talked amongst themselves of the merry jest that had been played upon the sheriff, and of the adventures that had befallen each member of the band in their disguise. But when the feast was done, Robin Hood took Little John apart and said, Truly am I vexed in my blood, for I heard the sheriff say today, 'Thou shootest better than that coward knave Robin Hood, that dared not show his face here this day.' I would fain let him know who it was who won the golden arrow from out his hand, and also that I am no coward such as he takes me to be." Then Little John said, "Good master, take thou me and Will Stuteley, and we will send you fat sheriff news of all these by a messenger such as he doth not expect." That day the sheriff sat at meat in the great hall of the house at Nottingham town. Lawn tables stood down the hall, at which sat men-at-arms, household servants, and good stout villains. Villains in this term mean a bond servant, not an actual villain, in all 80 and more. There they talked of the day's shooting, as they ate their meat and quaffed their ale. The sheriff sat at the head of the table upon a raised seat under a canopy, and beside him sat his dame. By my trot," said he, "I did reckon full roundly that knave Robin Hood would be at the game today. I did not think he was such a coward. But who could that But who could that saucy knave be who answered me to my beard so bravely? I wonder that I did not have him beaten. But there was something about him that spoke of other things than rags and tatters. Then, even as he finished speaking, something fell rattling among the dishes on the table, while those that sat near started up wondering what it might be. Excuse me? After a while, one of the men at arms gathered courage enough to pick it up and bring it to the sheriff. Then everyone saw that it was a blunted gray goose shaft with a fine scroll about the thickness of a goose quill tied near to its head. The sheriff opened the scroll and glanced at it, while the veins upon his forehead swelled and his cheeks grew ruddy with rage as he read, for this was what he saw. Now heaven bless thy grace's stay, say all in sweet Sherwood, for thou didst give the prize away to merry Robin Hood. Whence came this? Cried the sheriff in a mighty voice. Even through the window, your worship, quoth the man who had handed the shaft to him. That's the end of that part. Okay. Give me 1 second to drink a little bit more. Oh my goodness. And we will continue. You know what's interesting about that chapter is that event is very often talked about in adaptations of Robin Hood, most famously in the 1938 version. But the whole bit where they split the arrow, of course, for those who were here last week, that appears in an earlier chapter when they're talking about how he met Little John. The So what happens very often in these adaptations is they will combine the archery contest with the fight with Little John, because shooting the arrow in half is a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? A little bit more dramatic than, say, shooting it thing. Sophia Ignacy, favorite Robin Hood adaptation? Go. Oh, that one's simple. 1938's The Adventures of Robin Hood. Errol Flynn. It is a classic. Who else? Famous. Favorite Robin Hood adaptations. Everyone, what's your favorite Robin Hood adaptation? What's your favorite Robin Hood adaptation, Sophia? Sophia and the Disney. Ah! But which Disney version, Sophia? There were two versions. Believe it or not. Sophia Ignacy, also Disney Fox Robin. Ah, the animated version. Because Disney did do a live action Robin Hood movie, which was done in the 1950s. It was their second live action movie, and it was called Robin Hood and His Merry Men. And it's a really fascinating adaptation because it goes out of its way to really combine every version of Robin Hood together, which is really great. And also uses some of the more obscure characters in it. So let us see. Let's continue then. So we are on 3. Will Stuteley rescued by his good companions. Now when the sheriff found that neither law nor guile could overcome Robin Hood, he was much perplexed, and said to himself, "Fool that I am! Had I not told our king of Robin Hood, I would not have got myself into such a coil. But now I must either take him captive, or have wrath visited upon his head from his most gracious majesty. Visited upon my head from his most gracious majesty. I have tried law, and I have tried guile, and I have failed in both, so I will try what may be done with might." Thus communing within himself, he called his constables together, and told them what was in his mind. "Now, take ye each 4 men, all armed in proof," said he, "and get ye gone to the forest at different points, and lay in wait for this same Robin Hood. But if any constable finds too many men against him, let him sound a horn, and then let each band within hearing come with all speed and join the party that calls them. Thus, I think, shall we take this green-clad knave. Furthermore, to him that first meeteth with Robin Hood shall 100 pounds of silver money be given, if he be brought to me dead or alive, and to him that meeteth with any of his band shall 20 pounds be given, if such be brought to me dead or alive." Sorry, it took me a moment. I thought I was repeating myself. "So be ye bold, and be ye crafty." So thus they went in 60 companies of 5 to Sherwood Forest, to take Robin Hood, each constable wishing that he might be the one to find the bold outlaw, or at least one of his band. For 7 days and nights they hunted through the forest glades, but never saw so much as a single man in Lincoln Green, for tidings of all this had been brought to Robin Hood by trusty Edom or the Blue Boar. When he first heard the news, Robin said, "If the sheriff dares send force to meet force, woe will it be for him and many a better man beside. For blood will flow, and there will be great trouble for all. But fain would I shun blood and battle, and fain would I not deal sorrow to womenfolk and wives because good stout yeomen lose their lives. Once I slew a man, and never do I wish to slay a man again, for it is bitter for the soul to think thereon. So now we will abide silently in Sherwood Forest, so that it may be well for all. But should we be forced to defend ourselves, or any of our band, then let each man draw bow and brand with might and main." At this speech many of his band shook their heads and said to themselves, "Now the sheriff will think that we are cowards, and folk will scoff throughout the countryside, saying that we fear to meet these men." But they said nothing aloud, swallowing their words, and doing as Robin bade them. Thus they hid in the depths of Sherwood Forest for 7 days and 7 nights, and never showed their faces abroad in all that time. But early in the morning of the 8th day, Robin Hood called the band together and said, "Now, who will go and find what the sheriff's men are at by this time? For I know right well that they will not bide forever within Sherwood shades." At this a great shout arose, and each man waved his bow aloft, and cried that he might be the one to go. Then Robin Hood's heart was proud when he looked around on his stout brave fellows, and he said, "Brave and true are ye all, my merry men, and a right stout band of good fellows are ye. But ye cannot all go, so I'll choose one from amongst you, and it shall be good Will Stuteley, for he is as sly as e'er an old dog-fox in Sherwood Forest." Then Will Stuteley leapt high aloft, and laughed loudly, clapping his hands for pure joy that he should have been chosen from amongst them all. "Now thanks, good master," quoth he, "and if I bring not news—" Why am I doing him in a Scottish accent? I'm sorry. "And if I bring not news of those knaves to thee, call me no more thy sly Will Stuteley." I don't know why I slipped into the Scottish accent for Will Stuteley. Maybe I should stick with it. What do you think, my dear scholars? Should I give Will Statley a Scottish accent, even though there's no sign of him being Scottish? That just seems a little silly. Kidnapped has infected me, apparently, with an ill ability for not doing Scottish accents. Then he clad himself in a friar's gown, and underneath the robe he hung a good broadsword, in such a place that he would easily lay hands upon it. Thus clad he set forth upon his quest, until he... Oh, hello there, Viking official. Hello, welcome. We are reading The Merry Adventures of Robin Hood. Welcome, have a seat, enjoy the reading. Glad to have you here. Where am I? Thus clad he set forth upon his quest, until he came to the verge of the forest, and so to the highway. Velkin official, rare to find anyone reading on here. Oh, well, you're in luck. Our fine Sophia Ignace here is also a reading VTuber. Um, she is a marvelous one, in fact. We also know a couple. There are many reading VTubers out there. Yes, as Sophia said, there are many. You just have to kind of hunt for them. He saw two bands of the sheriff's men, yet he turned neither to the right nor the left, but only drew his cowl the closer over his face, holding his hands as if in meditation. FTWA Seer. Valking, seems like me time diff is too bad, so I never see one. Aw. Um, I don't think Wastes is on right now, but FT Wastes is another reading VTuber. I probably should give a shout out, I'm guessing. Um, I'll give a shout out to you, Sophia Ignacian. Oh, whoops. That one's for Sophia. I'll have to do another one for Wastes later. I forgot. You can only do so much. Like it's a wrote a short story that I'd really like some feedback or just a normal read, but I haven't found anyone so far. It's like zero point 0.5 pages long. Oh, interesting. Well, I'm sure. I hope someone will be able to read that for you. I'm sure there's someone out there. Where am I? I've completely lost track of where I am. Oh, so at last he came to the sign of the Blue Boar. For, quoth he to himself, our good friend Edom will tell me all the news. At the sign of the Blue Boar he found a band of the sheriff's men drinking right lustily, so, without speaking to anyone, he sat down upon a distant bench, his staff in his hand, and his head bowed forward as though he were meditating. Thus he sat waiting until he might see the landlord apart, and Edom did not know him, but thought him to be some poor tired friar, so he let him sit without saying a word to him or molesting him. Ooh boy! Though he liked not the cloth. For, said he to himself, it is a hard heart that kicks the lame dog from off the sill. As Stuteley sat thus, there came a great house cat and rubbed against his knee, raising his robe a palm's breadth high. Stuteley pushed his robe quickly down again, but the constable who commanded the sheriff's men saw what had passed, and saw also fair Lincoln green beneath the friar's robe. He said nothing at the time, but communed within himself in this wise: Yon is no friar of orders grey, and also I wot no honest yeoman goeth about in priest's garb, nor doth a thief go so for naught. Now I think in good sooth that is one of Robin Hood's own men. So presently he said aloud, O holy father, wilt thou not take a good pot of March beer to slack thy thirsty soul withal? But Stuteley shook his head silently, for he said to himself, Maybe, maybe there be those here who know my voice. Then the constable said again, Whither goest thou, holy friar, upon this hot summer's day? I go a pilgrim to Canterbury town, answered Will Stuteley, speaking gruffly so that none might know his voice. Of course, Canterbury was a very famous pilgrimage site in in England, if I recall. If I recall correct, yeah. Well, obviously, the very famous Canterbury Tales, which Sophia Ignacy has read for her streams, um, involved a pilgrimage to Canterbury. Then the constable said for the third time, Now tell me, holy father, do pilgrims to Canterbury wear good Lincoln green beneath their robes? Ha! By my faith, I take thee to be some lusty thief, and perhaps one of Robin Hood's own band. Now, by Our Lady's grace, if thou movest hand or foot, I will run thee through the body with my sword. Then he flashed forth his bright sword, and leaped upon Will Stuteley, thinking he would take him unaware. But Stuteley had his own sword tightly held in his hand, beneath his robe, so he drew it forth before the constable came upon him. Then the stout constable struck a mighty blow, but he struck no more in all that fight. Sophia Ignacy, lusty thief. You'll hear that word. There's a lot of lusty in this story. A lot of lusty thieves, lusty men, gay old times, and such. Or then the stout constable struck a. I already said that. Then the stout constable struck a mighty blow, but he struck no more in all that fight, for Stuteley, parrying the blow right deftly, smote the constable back again with all his might. Then he would have escaped, but could not, for the other, all dizzy with the wound and with the flowing blood, seized him by the knees with his arms, even as he reeled and fell. Then the others rushed upon him, and Stuteley struck again at another of the sheriff's men, but the steel cap glanced the blow, and though the blade bit deep, it did not kill. Meanwhile, the constable, fainting as he was, drew Stuteley downward, and the others, seeing the yeoman hampered so, rushed upon him again, and one smote him a blow upon the crown, so that the blood ran down his face and blinded him. Then staggering he fell, all sprang upon him, though he struggled so manfully that they could hardly hold him fast. Then they bound him with stout hempen cords, yeah, so that he could not move either hand or foot, and thus they overcame him. But it was a doleful day's doings for two of that band, for the constable was sorely wounded, and the other, that stoutly smote upon the crown, lay sick for many a day ere he was the stout man that he had been before this famous fight. Robin Hood stood upon the greenwood tree, thinking of Will Stuteley and how he might be faring, when suddenly he saw two of his stout yeomen come running down the forest path, and betwixt them ran buxom Macon of the Blue Boar. Then Robin's heart fell, for he knew they were the bearers of ill tidings. Will Stuteley hath been taken, cried they, when they had come to where he stood. And is it thou? Now, let me get the voice back again. And is it thou that hast brought such doleful news? Said Robin to the lass. Ay, marry, for I saw it all, cried she, panting as the hare pants when it has escaped the hounds. And I fear he is wounded, sir, for one smote main shrewdly I the crown. They have bound him and taken him to Nottingham town, and ere I left the Blue Boar I heard that he should be hanged tomorrow day. He shall not be hanged tomorrow day, cried Robin, or if he be, full many a one shall gnaw the sod, and many shall cause to cry, Alack a day! Then he clapped his horn to his lips and blew 3 blasts right loudly, and presently his good yeomen came running through the greenwood until 70 bold blades were gathered around him. Now hark you all, cried Robin. Our dear companion, Will Stuteley, hath been taken by that vile sheriff's men. Therefore doth it behoove us to take bow and brand in hand to bring him off again. For I wot that we ought to risk life and limb for him, as he hath risked life and limb for us. Is it not so, my merry men all? Then all cried, Aye, with a great voice. Now, quoth Robin again, if there be any here that care not to risk life and limb, let them bide within Sherwood shades, for I can stray no man to my will. But tomorrow I will bring Will Stuteley back, or I will die with him. Ooh. Then up spake stout Little John. Thinkest thou, good master, he said, that there be one among us all that would not risk life and limb for fellow in trouble? If such there be, then do not I know every man in this company of stout yeomen? And moreover, if there be such, I wot he should be stripped and beaten from out our merry woodlands. Is it not so, good friends? They all cried, Aye, again, for there was not one man among them that would not venture everything for a friend in need. Need another drink of water? Okay. So the next day they all wended their way from Sherwood Forest, but by different paths, for it behooved them to be very crafty. So the band separated into parties of 2s and 3s, which were all to meet again in a tangled dell that lay near to Nottingham town. Then, when they had all gathered together at the place of meeting, Robin spoke to them thus. Now, we will lie here in ambush until we can get news, for it doth behoove us to be cunning and wary if we would bring our friend Will Stuteley off from the sheriff's clutches. So they lay hidden a long time, until the sun stood high in the sky. Sorry, I accidentally kicked something. So they lay hidden a long time, until the sun stood high in the sky. The day was warm, and the dusty road was bare of travelers, except an aged palmer who walked slowly along the high road that led close beside the grey castle wall of Nottingham town. When Robin saw that no other wayfarer was within sight, he called young David of Doncaster, who was a shrewd man for his years, and said to him, Now, get thee forth, young David, and speak to yonder palmer that walks beside the town wall, for he hath come but now from Nottingham town, and may tell thee news of good Stuteley, perchance. So David strode forth, and when he came up to the pilgrim, he saluted him, and said, Good morrow, holy father, and canst thou tell me when Will Stuteley will be hanged upon the gallows tree? I fain would not miss the sight, for I have come from afar to see so sturdy a rogue hanged. Now out upon thee, young man, cried the palmer, that thou shouldest speak so when a good stout man is to be hanged for nothing but guarding his own life. And he struck his staff upon the ground in anger. Alas, says I, that this thing should be. For even this day, towards evening, when the sun falleth low, he shall be hanged, 80 rods from the great town gate of Nottingham, where 3 roads meet. For there the sheriff sweareth he shall die as a warning to all outlaws in Nottinghamshire. But yet I say again, alas, for though Robin Hood and his band may be outlaws, yet he taketh only from the rich and the strong and the dishonest man, Well, there is not a poor widow or a peasant nor a peasant with many children nigh to Sherwood. I'm doing it as a Scottish accent again. Why? Why am I doing Scottish accents? I keep slipping into it. Scottish accent, why? Where am I? Why, there is not a poor widow, nor a peasant with many children nigh to Sherwood, Ugh. But has barley flour enough all the year long through him. It grieves my heart to see one as gallant as this Studley die, for I have been a good Saxon yeoman in my day, ere I turned palmer, and well I know a stout hand and one that smiteth shrewdly at a cruel Norman or a proud abbot with fat money bags. Had good Studley's master but known how his man was compassed about with perils, perchance he might send succor to bring him out of the hand of his enemies. Okay, so it's important to note something here for historical research purposes. So this book mentions the idea of a conflict between the Saxons and the Normans. And if you've watched some form of Robin Hood, especially the 1938 version, you will hear that repeated, where Robin is part of the good Saxon people who are defending themselves against the Norman nobles and all that. Um, that is actually pure fiction, or at least pure fiction at this time that the story is taking place. Um, by this moment that the Robin Hood story takes place, there really isn't much of a difference between Norman and Saxon in England. It's pretty much gone. Even early on, peasants who were Saxon, if I recall correctly, I may be wrong, so pardon that. There wasn't much changeover between the Norman nobles and the Saxon nobles, so peasants really wouldn't have cared all that much. Um, from what I recall, a lot of the whole mythos of the idea of the Norman Saxon conflict comes from Sir Walter Scott's Ivanhoe, which also features Robin Hood in it. But the by this time in this story, there is literally no real conflict going on between the two. Where was I? It grieves my heart to see one as gallant as this Studley die, for I have been a good Saxon yeoman in my day, ere I turned palmer, and well I know a stout hand and one that smiteth shrewdly at a cruel Norman, or a proud abbot with fat money bags. Had good Studley's master but known how his man was compressed about with perils, and perchance he might send succor to bring him out of the hand of his enemies. Ay, Mary, that is true. That is true. Of course, Scottish accent again, cried the young man. If Robin and his men might be nigh this place, I wot right will they will strive to bring him forth from his peril. But fare thee well, thou good old man, and believe me that if Will Stuteley die, he shall be right well avenged. I wish you could see the hat in this illustration of David of Doncaster. It is absolutely ridiculous. Then he turned and strode rapidly away, but the palmer looked after him, muttering, I wot that youth is no country hind that hath come to see a good man die. Well, well, perhaps Robin Hood is not so far away, but that will be stout doings this day. So he went upon his way, muttering to himself. When David of Doncaster told Robin Hood what the palmer had said to him, Robin called the band around him and spoke to them thus: "Now let us get straightway into Nottingham town, and mix ourselves with the people there. But keep ye one another in sight, pressing as near the prisoner and his guards as ye can, when they come outside the walls. Strike no man without need, for I would fain avoid bloodshed. But if ye do strike, strike hard, and see that there be no need to strike again. Then keep all together until we come again to Sherwood, and let no man leave his fellows." The sun was low in the western sky when a bugle note sounded from the castle wall. Then all was bustle in Nottingham town, and crowds filled the streets, for all knew that the famous Will Stuteley was to be hanged that day. Presently the castle gates opened wide, and a great array of men at arms came forth with noise and clatter, the sheriff all clad in shining mail of linked chains, riding at their head. In the midst of all the guards in a cart, with a halter about his neck, rode Will Stuteley. His face was pale with his wound, and with loss of blood, like the moon in broad daylight, and his fair hair was clotted in points upon his forehead, where the blood had hardened. This is a very violent book. So much graphic description. When he came forth from the castle, he looked up and he looked down, but though he saw some faces that showed pity, and some that showed friendliness, he saw none that he knew. Then his heart sank within him like a plummet of lead, but nevertheless he spoke up boldly. "Give me a sword into my hand, Sir Sheriff," said he, "and wounded man though I be, I will fight thee and all thy men till life and strength be gone." "Nay, thou naughty varlet," quoth the sheriff, turning his head and looking right grimly upon Will Stuteley, "thou shalt have no sword, but shalt die a mean death, as beseemeth a vile thief like thee." "Then do but untie my hands, and I will fight thee and thy men with no weapon but only my naked fists. I crave no weapon, but let me not be meanly hanged this day." Then the sheriff laughed aloud. "Why, how now?" quoth he. "Is thy proud stomach quailing? Strive thyself, thou vile knave, for I mean that thou shalt hang this day, and that where three roads meet, so that all men shall see thee hang, for carrion crows and daws to peck at." That's another thing you see in a lot of these old literatures, is the idea of someone being hanged at a crossroads. And that is exactly what the reason is exactly what the sheriff describes as. It's a place where anyone, no matter which way they're going, are going to see the dead body, unfortunately. It's rather gruesome. "Oh, thou dastard heart!" cried Will Stuteley, gnashing his teeth at the sheriff. "Thou coward hind! If ever my good master meets thee, thou shalt pay dearly for this day's work. He doth scorn thee, and so do all brave hearts. Knowest thou not that thou and thy name are jest upon the lips of every brave yeoman? Such a one as thou art, thou wretched craven, will never be able to subdue bold Robin Hood." "Ha!" cried the sheriff in a rage. "Is that even so? Am I a jest with thy master, as thou callest him? Now I will make a jest of thee, and a sorry jest withal, for I will quarter thee limb from limb after thou art hanged." And then he spurred his horse forward, and said no more to Stuteley. At last they came to the great town gate, through which Stuteley saw the fair country beyond, with hills and dales all clothed in verdure, and far away the dusky line of Sherwood's skirts. Then when he saw the slanting sunlight laying on field and fallow, shining redly here and there on cot and farmhouse, And when he heard the sweet birds singing their vespers and the sheep bleating upon the hillside, and beheld the swallows flying in the bright air, there came a great fullness to his heart, so that all things blurred to his sight through salt tears, and he bowed his head lest the folks should think him unmanly when they saw the tears in his eyes. I don't know. I don't think it's unmanly to cry. There's no shame in that. Thus he kept his head bowed until they had passed through the gate and were outside the walls of the town. But when he looked up again, he felt his heart leap within him and then stand still for pure joy, for he saw the face of one of his own dear companions of Mary Sherwood. Then glancing quickly around, he saw well-known faces upon all sides of him, crowding closely upon the men-at-arms who were guarding him. Then of a sudden the blood sprang to his cheeks, for he saw that for a moment his own good master in the press, and seeing him knew that Robin Hood and all his band were there. Yet betwixt him and them were a line of men at arms. "Now, stand back!" cried the sheriff in a mighty voice, for the crowd pressed around on all sides. "What mean ye, varlets, that ye push upon us so? Stand back, I say!" There came a bustle and a noise, and one strove to push between the men-at-arms so as to reach the cart, and Stuteley saw that it was Little John that made all that stir. "Oh, hello there, One Truel. Welcome. Hola, amigo. Welcome, welcome, welcome." "Oh, thank you for the hydrate, One Truel." We are reading Merry Adventures of Robin Hood. They're about to rescue Will Stuteley from being hanged. "Now stand thou back!" cried one of the men-at-arms, whom Little John pushed with his elbow. "Now stand thou back thine own self," quoth Little John, and straightway smote the man a buffet beside his head that felled him as a butcher fells an ox. And then he leaped to the cart where Stuteley sat. "I pray thee take leave of thy friends ere thou diest, Will," quoth he, "or maybe I will die with thee if thou must die, for I could never have better company." And then with one stroke he cut the bonds that bound the other's arms and legs, and Stuteley leaped straightway from the cart. "Now as I live," cried the sheriff, "yon varlet I know right well as a sturdy rebel. Take him, I bid you all, and let him not go." So saying, he spurred his horse upon Little John, and rising in his stirrups smote with mighty and main. But Little John ducked quickly underneath the horse's belly, and the blow whistled harmlessly over his head. "Nay, good Sir Sheriff," cried he, leaping up again when the blow had passed, "I must e'en borrow thy most worshipful sword." Thereupon he twitched the weapon deftly from out the sheriff's hand. "Here, Stuteley," he cried, "the sheriff hath lent thee his sword. Back to back with me, man, and defend thyself, for help is nigh." "Down with them!" bellowed the sheriff in a voice like an angry bull, and he spurred his horse upon the two who now stood back to back, forgetting in his rage that he had no weapon with which to defend himself. "Stand back, sheriff!" cried Little John, and even as he spoke a bugle horn sounded shrilly, and a cloth-yard shaft whistled within an inch of the sheriff's head. Then there came a swaying hither and thither, and oaths and cries and groans and clashing of steel, and swords flashed in the setting sun, and a score of arrows whistled through the air, and some cried, "Help! Help!" and some, "A rescue! A rescue!" "Treason!" cried the sheriff in a loud voice. Bear back, else we be all dead men." Thereupon he reined his horse backward through the thickest of the crowd. Now Robin Hood and his band might have slain half the sheriff's men had they desired to do so, but they let them push out of the press and get them gone, only sending a bunch of the arrows after them to hurry them in their flight. "Oh, stray!" shouted Will Stuteley after the sheriff. "Oh, stay!" That's what I meant. Shouted Will Stuteley after the sheriff. "Thou wilt never catch hold of Robin Hood if thou no stand to meet him face to face." But the sheriff, bowing along his horse's back, made no answer, but only spurred the faster. Then Will Stuteley turned to Little John and looked him in the face till the tears ran down from his eyes, and he wept aloud, and kissing his friend's cheeks. "Oh, Little John," quoth he, "mine own true friend, and he that I love better than man or woman in all the world beside." Well, we learned a new thing about Will Stuteley and Little John today, apparently. "Little did I reckon to see thy face this day, or to meet thee this side of paradise." And Little John could make no answer, but wept also. Then Robin Hood gathered his band together in a close rank, with Will Stuteley in the midst, and thus they moved slowly away towards Sherwood, and were gone, as a storm cloud moves away from the spot where a tempest had swept the land. But they left 10 of the sheriff's men lying along the ground wounded, some more, some less, yet no one knew who smote them down. Thus the sheriff of Nottingham tried thrice to take Robin Hood, and failed each time. And the last time he was frightened, for he felt how near he had come to losing his life. So he said, "These men fear neither God nor man, nor king's officers. I would sooner lose mine office than my life, so I'll trouble them no more." So he kept close within his castle for many a day, and dared not show his face outside of his own household. And all the time he was gloomy, and would speak to no one, for he was ashamed of what happened that day. And scholars, as much as I want to read more, I think I'm going to stop for the evening here. I know we only read 2 chapters, but I'm feeling really kind of weary and worn out, and I can tell I'm kind of struggling a little bit. So with your permission, my dear scholars, I would like to stop at this moment in the book. If that's all right with you, I would hate to disappoint you all. What do you say, my dear scholars? Should I try and push myself to do another chapter? I mean, they're awfully long chapters. Or should I stop here? What do you think? Okay, well, I'll take that as it's okay for me to stop for now. um, it's kind of interesting, as we've seen, we've been introduced to, so far, other than Little John and Robin Hood, there hasn't been a lot of recognizable merry men. I mean, we've got Will Stuteley, who is often combined with another character, who we'll get to later on in the story, because it gets very confusing for some adaptations to have 2 characters named Will in the same story. We have the Tinker, whose name I completely have forgotten. Sophia Ignacy, I love Will. Aw, good. Will Stuteley is interesting. He's kind of Robin's third in command, I think. Then we have Dawn of what was it? Was it Donald of Doncaster, I think, who is apparently so far kind of the baby of the bunch, the youngest member, since they keep making a mention of his age and how young he is compared to the others. which is why I give him a youngish voice. Um, but yes, we haven't gotten very far. I know we just finished the first part of the book, but I promise next time I do the stream, I will read 3 chapters. I'll do a little bit of a longer stream to make up for tonight because unfortunately I can feel the energy draining out of me right now. Okay then, so for now, let's see who we can raid tonight. Let me check this one. Give me 1 second. Let's rate Jewelry Jelly. We haven't rated her in a while, and she is playing Final Fantasy V, the Pixel remake. So let's go and visit her today. So, my dear scholars, I say unto you, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, till we meet each other again at the study. Take care, and I shall see you next time. Till then, farewell and bye bye.